Hello, everyone. Welcome to Weekly Manga Recap. It's August 15th of 2024, and we're talking about manga today.
Yes.
Not yesterday.
No.
We tried that. I tried so hard yesterday.
I feel bad for Nick, everybody. He had to do so many troubleshootings for a problem that just seemed to be bad, shitty internet at the time. I have no idea.
It was my Wi-Fi router, then it was just Discord just decided to be a poop. And so after about 3 tries, it was and about an hour of trying to do the show, it just became a matter of, it's not going to happen. Try another day. Got on with Quinn today. Bam! Ready to go. Internet working. We've got our webcams on. We can actually interact and do things.
Yeah.
And she's doing a thing with her.
Yeah, I'm doing a thing.
Oh, there goes the monetization. We never get monetized. It's fine.
No, we're still that 12 minutes have passed. Oh no. We were very
minute 1 complete.
Yeah, I was like, we were very close to this first minute of this podcast.
We do not have a regular week of Weekly Manga Recap to talk with you guys about.
Fitting for a week with so many technical difficulties on our end. We needed, well, it's not Golden Week. What the fuck's this break for?
Oban Festival?
We needed an Obama festival of our own. So we're all taking, we took one yesterday.
Yeah, so we don't have, for example, I was gonna say My Hero Academia, but we're not gonna have that one.
I was gonna say, Nick. Oh, I don't think we get that one again. Actually, that's done. I'm sorry. Sure? I mean, we could reread old chapters and just act like they're new chapters. I'm like, Nick, do you think this Shinso guy is gonna be a big deal? This is kind of crazy.
It is the Oban Festival. I was actually right. Huh.
Of course you are. Nick's so smart. Guys,
it's summer, so it's the only thing I could think.
Excluding that one time with the diet building, if Nick says something on the show, he's 100% right usually.
It's one of those kind of weird things when you are pegged as quote unquote the smarter host, which I'm not. Like we have different specialties. It's just that sometimes I come across as if I know more.
It's because I'm an idiot. I just say too many dumb things. All right, like people might think I was smarter if I said less. But I unfortunately talk so much.
But you're also way funnier than I am, so
I disagree on that. But
when you are pegged as the smarter host, your mistakes, people are like, "Oh man, can you fucking believe that guy messed that up?"
I feel like maybe it was him just being like, "I got to be there for my girl." But as I said, like the second Austin heard that, he messaged me like, "Nick's wrong about the I pronunciation." I was like, "Oh, thank you."
It's actually part of Austin's scheme to get me to listen to more of his podcast so I can comb his stuff for mistakes.
That's the goal. It's the cross-contamination of... and then one day we do weekly funk dice and I don't know, it makes $1 bajillion. So I'm looking forward to that one.
Oh, man. But before we get to that inevitable mega crossover... we've got a manga to talk about today. Today, not yesterday. That was not going to happen. This is a series that we took as a recommendation a few weeks ago. It was actually something that it's been long enough that I have to remind myself of this, that you were saying like, oh man, you know what, Nick? We don't read enough bad manga. So you plucked something off of like the Sadistic September catalog.
Yeah, for the context, for anybody who doesn't use the Google Doc, Ninja spends a lot of time and effort making sure our sections are like like the spot we used to pick recommendations from is like organized. So there's like a section for like these are the really popular ones, and then these are the ones you can get free, and then these are the ones, et cetera, et cetera. And there's a section just for like these were recommended as sadistic September options.
And that means typically series is very bad. Now, the stuff that we cover for Sadistic September, bad in multiple different ways. Sometimes it's very stupid, like Air Gear.
Yes.
Sometimes it is the worst shit I've ever seen, like Kodomo no Jikan, where it's just like, this is grotesque. Sometimes it's just something we've got a history with, where we're really negative on something after having a bad, reading experience over a long period of time. And sometimes it's just dumb shonen that's just mediocre.
Yep.
This looked like it was going to be that last thing, where it was just going to be dumb mediocre shonen, talentless Nana. And I will say this very easily: if this had been a Sadistic September recommendation, it would have been the best Sadistic September recommendation by a fucking landslide.
So I think some context has to go into a little of this. I believe it was Bass Forever who picked this one, and I believe it was done when it was still much earlier on, as like, I bet this is something you guys would really hate recapping weekly. And I think from that context it makes a lot of sense, because if you were to ask me early on how I enjoyed the series, I would have told you I fucking hated it. It took us this long to get this episode out because it took me a really long time to get through the first 20 chapters. Like, it just took me a really long time to like push through that. Also, my dad is in awful health and I've been busy taking care of it, but that's tertiary to the whole
that's less fun to talk about.
Yeah, that's not really great podcast riffing material. So instead, I'll simply just say that this series, as we'll get into, I had like my opinions significantly change. But the very start of this was, I think, awful. In terms of like the vibes I was getting.
I can definitely see that. I didn't have that big a problem with the early chapters, but I could definitely see why anyone would not like the early stuff and they could turn around on it.
Yeah. Without, I guess, getting too much into like the concept of everything, all I can, like, if you were to give me like a quick synopsis, the vibes I was getting early on was like, oh, this is The Boys. Like, this is about a normal person killing a bunch of asshole superheroes, basically, because that's like the vibes at the start of it.
Yes.
And thankfully it is not that. No, I'm not even saying there's necessarily a problem with the first thing, but I just don't want to engage. Yeah. I don't want to engage with the first one. It's just not interesting to me. And then my opinions, unfolded like a fucking Pandora's box after I got a little bit further in. I was like, oh, I actually have real thoughts and feelings on this now.
This is actually a fairly long-running series. It's been going since 2016 in Monthly Shonen Gangan, which is the magazine that definitely most famously Fullmetal Alchemist came out of. You were talking before about how you read this, which is It's available through Square Enix's Manga app, which you had some thoughts on.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, I forgot we even talked about that yesterday. So this was originally licensed through Crunchyroll. Crunchyroll doesn't do manga anymore. Moved to Square Enix. And Square Enix has an app called Manga Up. And Manga Up is... I vaguely recall when this like made news in like manga circle. Like, I think I was still on Twitter back at this point. Like, that's how far back this was now, like several years. But there was essentially this thing of like, oh, this is the app where like you have to pay per chapter. Like, it's not just a subscription, although now it has a subscription. It was pay per chapter, but chapters are broken up into smaller mini chapters. So you have to pay for basically like, chapter 3 part 1, chapter 3 part 2. Like, so if you're trying to like free to play it, essentially, it's monumentally more difficult, like 3 times harder to get through it. So I think you're just intended to get a subscription. One of those, like, we're encouraging you to get a subscription because this service sucks otherwise. I'm like, I guess that's a strategy.
Isn't that the Spotify strategy these days?
It seems to be so. Yeah, I mean, they got me. I have a Spotify premium subscription, so I don't know anymore. Eventually, I did get so tired of ads. But within the app itself, it's fine. I guess it's not a particularly great app, but that's the part that was infuriating. I think there's also censorship issues, but I didn't run into any of those. There wasn't really enough extreme violence or sexuality in this series to like warrant sexual or censoring anything. But I did get one weird translation thing, which is that two characters, I guess, would always say like Shenpai or Sean
Yeah,
instead. Yeah,
yeah.
like I didn't. I guess that was supposed
As
to
a
be
as
like
a
a.
cute a cutesy lisp thing. Yeah.
Oh, okay. I was very curious about that going through, and I wasn't. I was like, maybe it's just a regional dialect they're trying to get across.
I thought that was deliberate because
Okay.
but
I thought it was a mistake when I saw it first, and then when I saw it again, I was just like, "Oh, this is intentional. Like, this is a character who does refer to people as Shenpai." Okay.
it's so that you know to hate her.
Oh.
So
Nick, how could you?
it's very very easily as
Fair.
it turns.
Fair.
All that she was missing was a stupid hat. Talentless Nana is a series where I would say there's like 3 or 4 distinct points where a very clear plot twist, or not necessarily a plot twist, but premise shift happens. Where, instead of saying like, okay, everyone's on an island, it's like, okay, now everyone's in the heartland and stuff. It changes things from that multiple times, and each time it feels like there is a big event that happens that is a catalyst for that changing.
Yes.
And the first of those things happens in the first chapter. This is one of those manga that has a twist in the first chapter, because the series is called Talentless Nana, and at first we are introduced to a boy named Nanao. And he is among this group of these kids who have superpowers. They're called Talented. They are brought to this school, which is to teach them how to utilize their abilities and learn to work together and basically become superheroes as they're growing up, so that they can stop the enemies of humanity, which are this race of weird kaiju monstrosity things that showed up at a certain point, like decades ago in human history, were defeated, but there is this fear that they are going to come back soon. So the Talented need to be ready to stop them. But weirdly enough, people who are at the school and have these talents, they're just this weird hodgepodge of abilities. So you get
There's some heavy hitters, and then there's some real fucking obtuse like late X-Men shit where you're like, all right,
yeah,
you can't just throw fire anymore, man. We gotta quirk this up a little bit. We need a couple extra paragraphs here.
because one of them is okay. 2 of the basic guys who are just kind of like always in the background are a fire throwing guy and an ice throwing guy.
They are like background characters in this.
Mm-hmm. They have kind of a semi-important role in the first chapter because they're in a dispute that Nanao helps to resolve, because he has the ability to negate other people's abilities, which is a weird thing because it's like, okay, but does it just work on his allies' talent? Why would you want to do that? But
I mean, he didn't choose to have the power. Power was given to him.
And then there's a guy later on who can take pictures, which always come true. They always tell the future, and it's like, all right, that's nice, but how does that help you stop a kaiju monster? Does it help you predict where they show up? Maybe. But they're this weird hodgepodge of abilities that just seem to run an entire spectrum of useful to useless. And this girl who transfers in, named Nana, has the ability to, like, she can read minds. And she, gets to know Nanao over the course of things, and she, gets close to him because he can apparently negate her ability. And she's like, oh my God, there's someone here who, like, I'm not constantly hearing their thoughts, and when I'm around him, I can just be myself and stuff. This is great. She has this tearful, connection with him. and then she pushes him off a cliff to kill him because the twist is that she is the talentless Nana. She is a talentless individual who has been sent to the island to kill all of these kids because, according to what she's been told, the talented are actually destined to become the enemies of humanity. They will morph into these hideous creatures, will be responsible for thousands upon thousands upon thousands of deaths. And so she has been sent here to infiltrate their class and murder them all.
Yes.
And that's where we start for about the first 20 chapters before slowly we transition to another part from there.
Yes. And the general sort of like rigmarole of these first 20 chapters is because that first inciting incident chapter is like, oh, a person was killed. Every subsequent chapter is kind of dealing with like the investigation thereof of why this person is gone and who is the culprit. So like immediately a new talented kid will reveal that they saw or they know what Nana did and blackmail her or some other kind of duplicitous thing. And this is where I said like there are boys vibes because like basically the first like 7 students she runs into are like sociopaths. Like all of them are like bonkers in their own way. Like they can't be normal or like decent people. They have to all be like insane people. So it's constantly like sort of like a cat and mouse game where the gifted are oftentimes the antagonists, but Nana herself is also kind of like just evil. Like I don't know. There's a bit of a like a push and pull that I wasn't always fully behind Nana because she would be rather ruthless, and sometimes people would get like the first couple kids I guess weren't so bad, but it's like immediately after that they're all awful. So you're like, I think I don't want her to get.
I guess those guys deserve to die. Yeah, sure.
Like very particularly, there is the camera guy who is probably like the weirdest and grossest because he's like that's where like the series actually like starts to imply like real gross things about him that doesn't again about a character until like Soma much later on. So you're like, I don't want her to get killed here, but she is also just killing students on what a fucking JPEG on her phone tells her. Like
every time that she checks her phone, because she is not, just like a person who is doing this. She is doing this as a mission that she has been sent on. And anytime that she basically comes across a student who she needs to find out more about, she looks down and it says like, oh yeah, so Sayakori is will be responsible for 500,000 deaths in the future if left unchecked, kind of thing. And so she's like, okay, well I got to stop these guys. Then these guys are horribly dangerous, and I got to kill them. So she's coming across these people, and she's like, well, by default, I need to kill them.
Yeah.
So in her mind, she has to do this because she is a child soldier. But as time goes on, you start to get like, okay, well, this guy is a monster and this guy is messed up and stuff. But Nana stops after a little while just assuming everyone is bad because she's, as she is in the process of trying to get close to the people in her class as part of her cover, because she wants to be, like a popular, well-liked student so that no one will want to come down on her and suspect her. She does legitimately start to form connections with one or two of them. And there is a great moment in an early one where she's, facing off against this girl who has the ability to raise people's corpses as zombies and command them, where she essentially takes a shot in the dark about what her deep, dark secret is and guesses right and reveals that this girl has like no good sides to her whatsoever. Like, there was this boy that she liked that she says she's loyal to, but it turns out she was actually jealous and like murdered him. And it's like now piling his corpse around to have it pretend to be her boyfriend and stuff. And Nana kills her and is like, why did I want to confirm that before I killed her? Why did I want to make sure she was a bad person before I killed her? And what would I have done if that hadn't been right?
Yeah, there is a level of like almost like shock value to a lot of the characters she runs into at the very start because they're all like, they're creepy little weirdos, so it's okay for her to kill them. But she does question it. However, at that point in time, I wasn't fully convinced the series was going to pay off on that.
Mm-hmm.
Because I didn't really know what this series was. I didn't realize this is actually still an ongoing
Yeah.
series. Like in my mind, I was like, oh, maybe this is just they ran for like 60 chapters and then it's done. Like there wasn't like a much of a vibe. So it wasn't until she really starts to question it and then like has like a crisis of faith over it because some of the people are good that she realizes she's killing, and like that's when it gets really interesting to me, is because suddenly now she's questioning things and we find out part of it is like she was essentially mind manipulated from like a
Mm-hmm.
child to do all this sort of stuff. And it's so like you start to really feel for Nana comes into her own as a character, and like the plot doesn't stop being tense. Like it
No,
doesn't stop being like, oh, there's like cat and mouse things going on. Like if anything, it amps up, but it's so
because you
much.
actually want Nana to live
Yeah,
now.
it's so much more enjoyable now. You feel the sympathy for her. You see like what like pieces they were setting up early on. Some stuff like I don't know. I think where everything really came together for me is the Kohaku arc that comes later on. Kohaku is the twins girl.
Ooh.
And that arc, like, I was so invested. I was so into it. I was having, like, just a great time. And, like, by the end, I'm, like, crying. Your heart's breaking. All this sort of stuff going on. Like, it's genuinely, really good. And it was getting good before that, but that's where I, like, really came together for me. And I
Mhm.
really appreciated when it came together because suddenly all of the characters started having new dynamics to me, and I started to get so much more invested in them.
Once it stops being a okay, Nana comes across a student and just kills them by the end of the story arc, that's when I think it does definitely get a lot better. There are nice things here and there in the early stretch, I think. It was enough for me to look at it and go, I was like, all right, this is not bad. It's just, kind of boring and formulaic.
Yeah.
And there are some problems with the structure of the thriller, like the investigation matter. So there is a very clever thing that is done early on, which is um, when the series first looks like it's going to be about like, oh, these three kids are going to work together and stuff, and Nanao is going to be the protagonist before he gets killed immediately, and Nana's going to be the girl. The third guy in the group, Kyoya, is introduced, and he seems like he's going to be the Sasuke, but it turns out he's just like a little weird nerd.
Yeah,
Uh,
that's yeah. He is one of the biggest shifts because before it, I really hated Kyoya. He was this
mhm.
added like, sort of dickhead detective here to like make things more difficult for Nana, who we're supposed to look to as our protagonist. So it's like this exhaust. Like you don't hate him. He is not evil, although he is a bit of a kind of weirdo.
Mhm.
But you just like every time he shows up, it's just kind of obnoxious because he's in this weird, vague state where he knows Nana is the one committing these murders, but he is very L in that it's like, I
Yeah.
know Light is Kira, but I can't act on it until I have 100% certainty, sort of thing. I'm like, this thing's exhausting.
Mhm.
But then eventually, he just starts to nerd out more and he becomes an ally, and you're like, now it's cool because you're on
Yes.
Nana's side. Like, suddenly, when like the tables turn and now she's like being accused of murder she actually didn't commit, he's
And
the first.
Kyoya's like, hold on.
He's
Yeah.
yeah, he's the first one to kind of jump in and be like, this sounded sus to me. Like, I know it all clues point to her, but something's up. This is actually not her.
It's very weird because Kyoya is sort of portrayed. The big problem with him for Nana early on is that his talent is immortality. So she can't kill him.
Yes.
She actually tries to do it as like her third victim or something like that. Sets like an entire room he's in on fire, and he just kind of rolls out of it. And he's like, "I'm fine."
What was up
Who
with
wonder who
that?
set that fire? Nana's big excuse every time that any suspicion is on her is like, "Oh, I guess an enemy of humanity showed up and killed them."
Yeah.
Like a ghost we can't see murdered them or something.
Oh, I said, an enemy of humanity must have taken control of my mind and made me stab them a whole bunch.
I think she does use that excuse once or twice, or
Yeah,
like,
there's
oh, they were taken over by an enemy of humanity, so I had to stab them in self-defense or
yeah.
something like that. Um, but it does become weird because yes, I had the exact same impression of like Kyoya is like the L to Nana's Kira, but what separates them is that yes, L was always pretty sure that Light was Kira, but there was enough room for doubt in his mind that he was like, I've still got to just keep this guy right
Yeah.
here until I can actually get him. And he's so good at covering his steps that I've just got to have him here as close as possible. Nana, on the other hand, because she's not a villain protagonist, she is just misguided and becomes more heroic. She's not this super flawless schemer. She has to improvise a lot. She's constantly, trying to come up with things. She's very clever and will trick people,
Yes.
but she does make mistakes. And Kyoya will like see something where she like, leaves a knife, that has her fingerprints all over it and be like, I have to take this to my lab or something like that, and will disappear and
Okay.
like
So here's also a reason I think why I dislike the start of this though, is because Nana is like a fucking superhero in some of the shit she's doing and planning out. Like there's a whole plot point where she like poisons somebody. And it's
yeah.
like it is like an elaborate 1,000-part step, like fucking Phoenix Wright case to get to the final point of just like, wait a minute, what's in your pocket, Nana? And she
Yeah.
reaches in and nothing's in there. And then we go on like a fucking chapter long flashback to explain how she like manipulated a fucking thumb phone print on a phone to send a text. Like all this stuff that you're just like, fuck off. This is so much nonsense. The shit she does later maybe isn't as intricate, but it's a lot more tolerable.
I feel like the series thinks that it's clever in how the mysteries unfold than it actually is. I do think there are some very interesting manipulations of the talents, and whenever there's something that's
Yes.
depending on how, like a twist in the talent, I think that that's really where the interesting twists can come in. Even in a very early example, there's this guy, I can't even remember his name because he only shows up for like one chapter, but he has the ability to jump back in time, which presents an interesting problem for Nana because it's like, oh shit, if I don't like kill this guy immediately, he'll jump back in time and then he'll do something to stop me and he'll know who I am and he'll out me to the others. So how do I get rid of him? Well, fortunately, there comes an occasion where the ice guy in the group, he's like messing around with his powers. He freezes the lake bed at the school grounds. So Nana comes to this guy and is like, "Oh, I think I know who killed Nanao. So come with me." And I think that if you go back exactly 24 hours from here, then you'll be able to catch them in the act. I think that this is the way to catch him. And so the guy's like, "Okay, I'll do that." And he jumps back, and then Nana looks down and she looks beneath the frozen lake bed and she sees his corpse because he jumped back to a time before the lake bed was frozen and he drowned because teleporting back in time causes him to be very weak and disoriented. So it's like, hey, that's a nice, clever thing about just utilizing the weaknesses and different abilities and stuff. And it's a very simple and clean way of getting away with it, as opposed to, you know, okay, if I just have the zombie put their thumb over the send button on this phone to the point that it'll rot and then touch it, and then there will be this girl who will put in this poison
Yeah.
contact lens. And
That was the part where I was really starting to struggle, where it's like, oh, I hate these characters. Even these two girls, they kind of tried to make a little mean, and it wasn't successful, which I realize now wasn't intentional. These were not supposed to be psychopaths; they were just kind of
right.
supposed to be like mean girls that we were catching like in the middle of a fight or whatever. But I was like, is this just what it's going to be, like catty nonsense? And thankfully, it's not. So I will say, for anybody who goes into this and is off put by like the first couple chapters and how cruel Nana seems and how kind of crappy some of the students are and all this, like all that is intentional or is at the very least
Mm.
addressed. Like now that I recognize kind of more about what this series is, I kind of almost look at the start as like, kind of like Undead Unluck taking some time to like find its footing and like start figuring out its own plot. Like the softening up of the Nana character is an intentional arc.
Mm-hmm. And that is a big thing that happens about like 20, 30 chapters in, because one of the characters that Nana befriends falsely at first, basically just to manipulate her, is a girl named Michiru, or Inukai, because she's dog-like, and she has a healing ability. So Nana still looks at her phone and is like, says here she's going to be responsible for 500,000 deaths. Gonna have to kill this girl, but she's useful to manipulate for right now. And that is definitely a point where you go like, how does a healer kill that many people? And he's like, I wonder if these things on your phone might be bullshit. And sure enough, while she's like meeting this girl, another important supporting character, Suruta, I think is what they go by. What is the glasses guy? Tachibana. I don't know.
Wait, which character?
Tachibana, the guy with the glasses.
Oh, yeah, Jin. Yeah.
Jin. He happens to be hiding on the island from a previous class where all his classmates died.
Interesting.
And he basically was like, oh, yeah, I see that you're like, the one who's killing people, basically. And she's like, how do you know? That's like, I can transform into anything. I've been following you around as like a cat, basically. So I know that you've done this. And he confronts her with this information, starts to sow some doubt in her head, steals her phone at one point, and realizes like you're getting contact from this person who is just sending you this stuff as your leash to lie to you to get you to kill people. And so between that, but mostly her connection with Michiru, who legitimately cares for Nana, thinks that she is a good person, and goes out of her way to help her whenever she comes home with these, mysterious wounds from when she's, killed her latest victim and they fought back. Nana grows connected to her and starts to actually care about her well-being, even though she's supposed to be getting ready to kill this girl. And she opens up to her and shares some of her past about how her parents were murdered when she was a kid, and she's always blamed herself for it because she like snuck out one night and her window was open when the people came in, and Michiru listens to it and is like, hey, it's not your fault and stuff. And then she remembers something, which is like, oh yeah, like my room was, like I ran outside and then I just remember my room being completely empty and except for like my parents' bodies. And Michiru was like, well, you said that you always like left your games out and stuff. So you went to bed and your games were out. You left through the window. That means your parents came into your room and they put your games away and they closed the window. It's literally not your fault that the intruders got into your home. It is not your fault that happened.
Yeah.
And like,
it's so
just
sweet.
From her hearing this story, she has figured this out and helps Nana to accept that she's not this horrible fuck up that needs to do this. And there's this intense moment where she's hugging her and comforting her, and Nana's like, I've killed all these people. There's nothing for me. And Michiru is like, yay, you're a good person. You deserve to be loved. And Nana just thinks to herself, is that okay for me? Like, I don't, she doesn't believe it, that she deserves to be happy. And that's when it really starts to be like, oh no, I've got feelings.
You very suddenly realize that Nana is a complicated character. And like, I guess like the term like morally gray shows up a lot, this is a character that I feel like you are meant to have very complex thoughts on, but like mostly sympathetic ones. Cause even like the darkest shit she did is either because she was brainwashed or because she's now basically in a life or death struggle to just survive. Like it's you could tell that like if she had the freedom to do it all over again, she probably would just be a normal girl and like be friends with a bunch of high schoolers and they would just have good times and memories together. So it's like really tragic when she starts to like reconcile with not just that she doesn't have that, but like she killed a couple kids that she's never going to have a chance for any relationship now. Like,
yeah. And she starts to regret what she has done, which is an even better part of like, yeah, these early chapters were kind of rough, but you know what they do? They inform who Nana is for the rest of the series from that point. Because she's like, I killed those people. Like they look, some of the people I killed, yes, were monsters. A couple of people I killed though were just like guys, just like regular kids who aren't going to get a chance to grow into a better person like I'm getting the chance to grow into now. So she's got that guilt on her.
Yeah, and it's brutal, knowing like there's people she becomes friends with who she has to eventually kind of confess to, like, I'm the reason, like, your close friend is dead.
Yeah.
I didn't, intend for them to get killed, but they did get killed either by my hand or by my actions. Like, eventually other people start getting killed on this island, even if it's not her. And, it's about figuring out why and all these sorts of things. And yeah, I mean, it does have a great payoff to it. I think there's, not going to be this issue for everybody, but obviously, yeah, I had a lot of trepidations at the start of this series that this was going to be a lot of like, hey, here's another person that Nana has to kill because they're a weird little freak, and she's going to do a bunch of like over imaginative puzzles to, dodge her way out of Kyoya and everything. And thankfully, that's not what it is. And, the parts of it I maybe didn't love at the start eventually becomes, things I adore. Like, when Kyoya shows up, I'm like, hell yeah, he's going to fucking add something to this. And I should even note, I haven't even completely finished. Fortunately, I ran out of time. So I stopped essentially, I guess, right before what happens is a time skip.
Oh, Quinn, the time skip stuff is so good.
I know. I loved just even like the Kohaku and Soma stuff had me like, this is really good. And then finding out like the stuff after it is even better makes me upset I couldn't get further into the series, but I really did try. I tried so hard. There's not been a lot of time. Once the series got good, I just did not have the time to read it.
Yeah, because from the point where Nana befriends Michiru, unfortunately, like right when that happens, bad things happen to her.
Yeah.
It's like,
and so, you knew it was going to happen. The moment they explained her quirk, I was like, this girl's dying. Like,
yeah. Every single talent has a cost of some kind. Kyoya's is really interesting because he is immortal, but eventually you learn that he has a memory that resets. And so he's got all these notebooks and stuff that he just keeps very detailed journals in. And he has these like very cute little things like, this person is my friend and this is what they look like, and draws like a picture of them and stuff. Oh. And but because his memory only lasts like 3 years, and so he's like, I'm going to just like forget everything within 3 years if I don't keep journals and remind myself of them. And without getting into heavy spoilers for you, there is a big flashback that happens that explains why he doesn't know where his sister is, where essentially you learn that she erased herself from his journals so that he would forget about her.
That's actually pretty cool.
Yeah. And when you find out where she is and what she's been up to, it's really cool because at a certain point it becomes very obvious what's happened, but it's still very cool. Sometimes the obvious twist is very neat.
Yeah, I will say there's a couple times where they do twists that you're like, yeah, like...
Obviously.
So I want to talk a little bit about Moe, if I can, who I know you didn't seem to be a fan of.
Mm-hmm.
But again, I only finished at the Soma arc, which is the first time that basically any character that's not Nana kind of gets like a sort of protagonist level focus for a little bit, because it is an arc primarily about, Moe, her relationship with her grandma, and her allegiances, essentially, because they've been this very questionable, nebulous thing. Like, she was another character when she showed up. I was like, I don't know if I'm vibing with this super much. Like,
when Nana starts to stray, Moe is an agent who essentially is sent in to basically follow up on her if Nana decides to stop killing people.
Yeah, it's tough to like exactly pin down what her like whole deal is at the start, because she's very like quirky and weird and like young. Like, she feels like a child next to Nana, who's already basically like, I think like
she's
teenager.
Like 14.
Yeah, like I was like technically I guess a teenager, but like Moe just has this weird energy though, because she's like on a dot ready to be like, yes, murder, murder, murder. Like, she's very quick to be like, the blood of the children. You're like, oh, so is she like a psychopath? And it takes a while before you realize like, oh no, she's just so wounded and broken, like her poor heart.
And she doesn't know what killing someone actually means, kind of thing.
It's brutal. Yeah, she gets an arc that gives a whole bunch of context. The entire like, existence in this series at this point. She's been talking about like, yeah, if I do this, I get to see my grandma, because we all know there's something at like the other end of this. Like I think the other end that what is it, Suroka, I don't remember if I'm getting his name right, but the like military commander guy that Nana is afraid of.
Yeah.
He has a promise with Nana about something of like, you do this and like these people, die, and you fight against humanity. Like she's been fed something that we eventually realize is bullshit.
Right.
And when you start hearing about this grandma, you're like, oh, is this also some bullshit this organization's doing? And it's like, no, she actually legitimately has a really cool fucking grandma who doesn't know about any of this shit that she's into now, has just wanted what's right for this girl because she came from a very abusive and shitty upbringing, and she doesn't know how to, like, she has a lot of difficulties accepting love. And when she finally gets in her life, she's like, oh, I'm just an old lady and going to die, and I'm worried about my grandchild adapting to that and like letting her know she needs to live her own life. And I was like, this is a crazy great emotional story that's all like the center point to like a background cat and mouse. Like there's a new opponent for Nana to deal with, and he's maybe the only one she can't get around. Like he might have outbeaten her, sort of like drama going on.
Once they really switch to getting off the island, because there's a big thing going on where a lot of this becomes very X-Men-y, where the talented are basically mutants.
Yes.
It turns out the big twist is that there is an agency in the government that knows the truth of the talented, which is that they are going to grow into the enemies of humanity. So they're like, okay, well, but we can't just like genocide all of the talented, because that is so many people. It's actually a very significant portion of the population. People won't go like, well, why do you have to kill all these people, a lot of whom are children? Specifically because once they get to like a little over 20, like almost all of them turn into monsters, basically. And there's actually a stretch of the manga where you don't know that, where it seems like it might just be propaganda. But no, it turns out apparently that's true. So that's kind of a thing that is also in the works of like, how are they going to deal with that? So Tsuruoka basically works for this, faction that is like, we're going to like, use this to, to kill all of these people for like the benefit of Japan and stuff. He's working with this, cabinet member to say like, hey, if you're the person who reveals the threat of these talented people that they're actually monsters, and then you deal with them, then you'll become the prime minister. And of course it's all like, stupid government stuff where, you manipulate and
everything's gonna turn out a-okay for that plan.
Yeah. And of course, we're going to utilize the suffering of a minority in the population for our own benefit.
Yes.
Of course. So he puts forward the next part of the plan, which is like, okay, instead of isolating all these kids on this island, we're going to actually have them like, be in this like bureau on the mainland and stuff. They'll be able to actually like go into society and stuff, which means that there are like, primarily the big thing is more stuff can happen because they're not restricted to being on just an island.
Yes.
For everything to happen.
We're also at the point where Nana is no longer just like wanton killing students. Like that's not the thing. So the concept has to shift now, and how kids are getting targeted has to change. So like putting it in a city adds more places for things to happen, essentially more locales, more elements, like cars can get added, warehouses, stuff like that.
Tsuruoka, when he tells all the kids this, you learn immediately why he is the villain of the series, because they're all like, oh, there are so many of our classmates who have died, and you say that we're here so that we can stop the enemies of humanity, but you're like, you're not training us. You're not helping us to defend ourselves. You're just, leaving us here to die. What you got to do something. You guys are the adults. You guys are the military. You got to do something. And Tsuruoka gives this big speech about how this is your chance to rise up, to live on, to become the hope for Japan, and gets all of the kids riled up and like oh, give your your classmates a reason to have died, basically, and gets them all like, oh yeah, let's do this, let's fight the enemies of humanity, except for Kyoya, who is right there being like, he has not answered any of our questions, he has not answered any of our concerns, he is just putting ideas in your head to help you, to make you avoid the actual real issues. But just because he sees through it doesn't mean all these other kids are going to see through it, because there's this very charismatic authority figure telling them what to do, and they're like, yeah, let's do it. Very effective scene. Yes. I really like that. And it gives you this idea of like, this is also why what this guy does to Nana. It gives you an immediate answer for why she is the way that she is right there. This guy talked to a bunch of strangers for the first time, got them all to do what he wanted in minutes.
Yes.
And he has had years to work on Nana.
Yeah, it's heartbreaking when you start to see like the depths of what Nana, because eventually you find out not only has all this happened, but her parents were killed because of him. Like her parents were, too fucking dissenting in science or something like that. Like they had to, like they outlived their usefulness, so he killed them and then took their daughter and brainwashed her into their soldier. And you're like, it's just such an unnecessarily evil touch. You could have gotten presumably any girl that was traumatized for this, but you had to take theirs. It's fucked up.
And I do think that the twins arc is one of my favorites in the series, because basically what happens is there is just this one girl who it turns out is part of a set of identical twins, and they start targeting Nana because they're like, you're the killer, and I'm gonna freaking kill you and stuff. And she says like, yeah, we don't like have a special talent or anything. All that we can do is we're identical twins, and we just know what the other is experiencing. We can like communicate telepathically across that distance. And so because nobody knows that I have this identical twin, I can have the perfect alibi at any given time. I'm the ultimate killer Nana's struggling this entire time to find a way to expose her and stuff, but she's like getting hurt, and nobody can actually like verify that how she got hurt and stuff. And
at this point, she's trying not to kill these kids. Like, it's not like she's like, oh, you got me in a one-on-one room. Bad idea, bitch. At this point, she's actively trying to be like, no, I'm trying not to kill you anymore.
And there is a very surprising twist that happens right at the end. Yeah. So Nana has captured this girl at the end and has, exposed her. And it's like, okay, she's the murderer and or whatever. She's trying to do all this, but Nana's like, I don't want to kill anyone anymore. So she's like, I'm gonna like help this girl to get away, basically. And she gets her and her sister, and they go off, and they're like, okay, they kind of like, they have a talk and they understand each other.
Yeah.
And then a bullet goes through the girl's head, and her sister vanishes. And it turns out that the twin sister was just an illusion who was summoned essentially as a way for this girl to deal with her own trauma. And so Nana was the only one who ever saw her the entire time. The reason why no one ever saw her interact with this girl is because she was the only one who could see her. She was hallucinating. And so everyone was like, yeah, she had this incredible hallucinogenic power. She could have been insanely powerful, but her own, mental trauma was causing her to do this instead. And then immediately following up on that, where this girl that Nana was okay with letting live, she had grown close to her, had defeated her, and then got this big like shonen, I defeated you, so now you're my friend thing going with her, saw her killed in front of her, and now realizes like, this is the way it's been for all these people, isn't it? Yeah. Like these aren't going to be like these serial killers or anything. They're just innocent kids. And she confronts Tsuruoka over this, and she's like, tell me that you have been lying to me about all this stuff. And Tsuruoka says to her, what you're really telling me is, give me a reason for why I have been a monster, basically. Yeah, like he just turns it around on her.
Eventually, like, he doesn't try, he's not the kind of guy that's gonna like try to weasel out. Like, he's not trying to outsmart her in a situation. He's just very bluntly like, just like, girl, the blood's already on your hands. Like,
yeah.
You can't. We're both monsters already, so I don't know what you want me to do anymore.
Yeah, he essentially accuses her of like, you're not trying to actually expose me. You're trying to give yourself an excuse to not feel like a monster, basically.
Yeah.
And Nana falls into this pit. There's this very, very harrowing sequence where like she has a gun trained on him and she tries to turn it on herself, and it turns out, oh, he was just doing it as a test for her, basically. And Nana's really, really at her rope's end, and then a big dickhead shows up to mess with her even more when she goes back to class.
Yeah. Can we talk a little about Soma?
I kind of didn't really like him, honestly.
Okay, interesting, because I know Laz in our Discord also felt that way. I like this guy, not like in a personal way. He's a very awful person. He's like the second character to start bringing up weird sexual stuff, because he's like, yeah, maybe I'll just murder you and then, sell the stuff film or porno. And I'm like, what? Ew, what? Very gross. But his whole gimmick is that, because it is very funny to introduce new characters when the whole concept is a singular class of characters that has only been getting smaller. So they have to come up with new ways for why characters we've never interacted with before are a big deal. So this character's gimmick is he's like the delinquent. So he just doesn't show up most of the time. He's just, he's just truant. So the gimmick to this guy, though, is he has electricity powers. But no one quite, except him, knows the scale of what he does, because he never shows it off. Like everyone else, like the Fire and Ice guy are so quick to show off their powers. He never shows his off, though. And the fear of what he could do is enough that no one wants to mess with him. And what I love is by the end of the series, we still don't really know the scale of what his power does. We know what the end result is, but we still don't know like how much of that was potentially, because like the exact
is he an Omega level mutant like Storm, or does he just go little?
we know at least how strong it was, but it is this fear, and that is partially how he kind of operates. He is not slick like everyone else. He does not have plans. He kind of just brute force, like kind of charismas his way into everything. And if you call him on something, he'll just, this is, what are you talking about? Fake news. Like that's not what's going on. Like he doesn't quite say fake news, but he'll just very quickly like dismiss it, or he'll come up with like a shit excuse and just kind of like aggressively bully you into buying it. And I kind of liked this level, because you genuinely fear for Nana, not even just in like, oh, this guy has like a super dangerous power, but just like, he's fucking huge. He's jacked. He is like legitimately terrifying, like for her to like go up against.
I think they say he's like one of the rugby team members,
which they threw a football the first time I noticed. I was like, I don't think they have laces on a rugby ball, but maybe
also I don't know how the school has a rugby team. Who do they play against?
Also, aren't there like 40 kids total? How many kids do you need to play fucking rugby?
The problem that I really had with him was not so much him as the mystery that he was involved in was very stupid. Because there is a twist at the end for what actually happened, but the fact that he keeps on successfully convincing people that Nana is probably the murderer is like, this does not fit her modus operandi. The person who was killed was run over by a car. Everyone has seen you drive a car, and no other student drive a car in this entire group. How is nobody thinking that you're the one responsible?
It did make sense, but I really did think it kind of fitting in this way of like his talent is this unknown thing that no one's willing to question it, but you're like, how fucking strong could it possibly be? But I'm not going to be the one to fucking try it and find out. Like that's kind of his way of getting through these situations, is like, no one really calls him out on it. Eventually, Kyoka is obviously investigating because, again, it's Nana has shown up as the culprit, and he's like, she's not doing these ones. Something happened. I ain't figured that part out yet, but I know she ain't doing these ones anymore. And that's something that actually gets addressed right afterwards, as she finally gets the chance to come clean, because that's also kind of a running plot thread throughout this arc, is Nana racked with guilt is like, I am not trying to hide this from my classmates anymore. Like, obviously at a period of time I was, because I was just processing my feelings. I hadn't come to grips with what I have done, like the weight of what I've done yet, but now I have this moment and I've learned more things. I need to tell them. And every time she tries to, it just gets interrupted, and not it's not perfect. Like, there are some times where you're just like, you could still tell them. Like, this is still kind of a big deal. Tell Kyoko right now. I like walk and talk or something. I understand you have to go do something else, but like, call me on my cell phone right now and we'll talk it through or something. But you know,
Like, it makes sense why she doesn't in that moment, because like, well, if I tell everyone that I'm the killer, they'll probably think that I killed this person, but I didn't.
Yeah.
So I probably shouldn't confess to them right
maybe
now.
right now is not the best time. But yeah, like I genuinely enjoy the stakes they set up in this arc, because it's another one where she has this crazy scenario. It's actually something I thought was really ingenious, is how she solves our what's his name? Soma? Soma's quirk ability, talent. I know it's called talent, but I want to call it a quirk.
It's kind of easy. Yeah.
But like, when you see the actual conclusion of that, you're like, oh, this is fucking brilliant. Like,
Yeah.
kind of evil, but like in a fun way. Like, in a, like, I like this.
What happens there is, in between Soma and the twins, not because Nana has been through this full thing where she has, decided, like, I don't want to kill people if it's not necessary, to, well, the people that I worked for are monsters. And so I was wrong to try and work for them. That completes her transformation into the hero of the story from the villain. But she's still got like villain coding to her. So there's this great moment where, like, Soma's been tormenting her friends or her classmates who become her friends and stuff. Moe, who is, she's going through so much because of her grandmother is dying and stuff. These other students that, are being tagged for the murder and everything. And then Nana finally gets to a point where she's like, all right, it's time for me to throw down. And she, she confronts someone on the street, and she does the exact same pose that she struck when she killed Nanao. So she does this big evil, like, I'm covering one eye while looking down on you, I'm the villain thing, but she's the hero now. Yeah. And so it's very satisfying, because, like, hey, there's this girl who has done all this stuff and she's come out the back end, but also she still has all the trappings of who she was before. And it makes her journey very interesting to follow from there, because after that point, yeah, there's a flash forward that happens of several years, and Nana is now like the underdog who is once again having to deal in a situation where she's on her own in an isolated situation. Instead of trying to kill all the talented, she's trying to save them all. And someone comes back, and
yeah.
What they do to justify that is very cool too.
Yeah, so I want to talk about a little element that I think I just want to like really emphasize, which is the powers in this series are really, really cool. And the part that makes them cool is that they're complicated. They're weird. Every, power has like not just a natural weakness of it, but just like some weird additional weakness. You can never just like, read minds. I can read minds, but only at random or something like that. But, like eventually characters start having really like intricate powers, and they're used primarily to like make these fun puzzles, because that often is like an element of kind of puzzle boxness going on here, where it's like, okay, we had to figure out what's going on, with mystery elements, all that sort of stuff. And then sometimes they're just used for like deeply emotional reasons. So there's like a detail of one character who could turn into anyone else as long as they're alive. And who they can and can't turn into is used for just dramatic effect. It's a thing that's played like an element already. Like it carries like a narrative weight. But then it's just used to carry like a whole new emotional weight as well. And I'm like, oh damn, this is great. Like, this is fucking phenomenal, So I really enjoyed those a lot. The powers really work to a great benefit, I think, in this series.
There is a weakness to Tachibana's ability, which is when Nana picks up on it, it is used to do a great reveal of the character who can turn into anyone never shows up as themselves.
Yeah.
It's such a neat idea to have that be a thing. And I ended up by the end of this manga. I mean this like the guy said, the series is about uh 8 years old. It's 90-ish chapters, but they're monthly chapters. And I read all of it in about a week and a half. I went through this at a very fast clip because I think I just kind of bulldozed through the first few.
Yeah.
And then after that point, I was just hooked on it. I thought that this was actually really good. I think that there are points where it doesn't always make perfect sense, but the thing that is nice about it is that it is a series where characters take steps forward despite it being a series where it looks like everyone's going to die.
Yeah.
And this is a shonen series, and it would not feel complete if it were just a matter of like, and then they just, someone shows up and they get killed. That would be boring. But because it goes into different directions, because it's also not afraid to switch up its premise those multiple times that it does happen, it's really good. There are some bizarrely beautiful moments that happen where, like, there's one where like a character is attacking Nana, and they make this, and when they're attacking her, they knock a bunch of plates onto the ground, and it zooms in on two of the plates, one of which has landed completely whole, and the other is shattered, and they say, "You become a better person, and I have become a worse person," while going over the two different plates, basically, and that's why I hate you. And it's like, symbolism.
Yeah, I really have come to appreciate the writing of, I think this is what Loose Boy is the
Loose Boy is their pen name.
Loose Boy's writing. But yeah, I mean, I genuinely did think this was going to be really rough going in, and by the end of it, I really enjoyed it. Now, I will fully admit, I don't know if I enjoyed it enough to subscribe. Like, I am canceling this subscription on Manga Up or whatever the fuck it's called as soon as we are done here. So I will have the remaining whatever, 15 days or so to read the rest of this. And if I can, I will. I mean, obviously it's still ongoing too. So like, I'm just going to stop at some point. But I do like this. I do think this is an enjoyable series. I really appreciate the characters and how they grow and how you feel for them. And there's such a genuine, feeling of like hope and community and, trying to connect with people on a human level. Like that is so much of the relationship between Nana and Moe. Like, she starts to almost have like a big sister relationship where she's just trying to protect Moe from how shitty this world is. Like eventually Moe is revealed to be the one responsible for giving information away that got Kohaku killed. And Nana isn't like mad, like feeling betrayed at that. She's just like worried that like Moe is getting in too deep and doesn't realize what she's doing. And she's like, I have to protect her before she actually kills someone.
Even though I didn't like Moe, I thought that she added incredible value to the portion of the series she was introduced in, because to have a character that was going down the path that Nana had been on before helps her to more fully realize that, gives her more reflection on the person that she was, and also gives this investment of like, can Nana prevent someone else from going down that path too? It's great dramatic writing for that, to just have stakes on stakes for a bunch of things. And also, as characters get introduced into things, you get more people that actually you do care about as it happens. There is when Kyoya becomes more of a protagonist and actually gets more involved in the story, as opposed to just the guy who thinks Nana's gonna be the murderer, when he actually has his own stuff going on. And he gets kind of his own sidekick too towards the end of the stuff on the island, and she doesn't do a whole lot, but because she is someone that Kyoya has a partnership with, there is just an additional element there of like, there is someone who cares about Kyoya and that Kyoya cares about, and so you care more about what happens to either of them in that case. It's a great example of sometimes what you thought was going to be a bad thing turns out to be a good thing, which is kind of the point of the series, and it represents that in
Sure.
itself.
Yeah. And also, it's just genuinely, I think, part of the reason why you should experience art is just like sometimes you find stuff you really adore. And I really, really did like this. I am, it's actually kind of funny because in a very similar episode to this, we discussed, oh gosh, what was the name of it? Alice in Borderlands.
Yes.
And I had a very similar sort of feeling on that where I was like, at the start, I hated this. I really didn't like it. I thought it was just going to be about a bunch of stupid people getting killed and like a couple of edgy characters and stuff like that. And by the end, I had like fully come to love the characters and what it had to say about humanity. And we had a great discussion on it. And I feel that's a very similar energy that I get to this series where I am really glad that I got the opportunity to get like pushed through on this series because I would have been bummed to not have experienced everything that comes after those first 20 chapters where you're like, oh, now I actually am like in love with this and I get everything that's going on. Maybe I should have just had more faith as a reader, but I'm also at a point right now where bad vibes can turn me off from doing things, and that's all I need, really. I'm like, you know what? I don't have that much free time. I need to go find something else to do then.
There's 13 billion manga in the world. You don't have time for all of them to turn out to be good, basically.
Yeah, in past times, and I think maybe what I was expecting, because this was originally pitched as a sadistic September, is that this was just going to be dog shit all the way through, and I was like, I don't know if I can get through because it's not even like the thing that would have made this more of a sadistic September is if the solution to a lot of her problems were stupid. They're not. Oh, yeah. They're not that bad in this. A lot of the time, you're like, yeah, there's some cleverness going on here. The eye contact girl one excluded, but it's not like bad stuff. So it's not like, oh, I melted your ice by turning the hair dryer onto high. Right. That like it's like actual thought process stuff. And that you can't dunk on. So maybe that should have been my clue that there was more going on here. But yeah, I just pleasantly surprised that I got, the chance to read on and be really happy.
I think that I definitely get you there. The point of the series where I actually went on our Discord server and said, I'm just going to call it that this was not like a sadistic September series, basically, was during the zombie stuff that was happening.
Okay.
Because it was like, all right, this is still like, kind of edgelordy stuff, but the stuff that Nana is doing to keep up with this girl who has a swarm of zombies that are after her is clever in a way that does not stretch credibility. Yes. The gambits that she does, it's like you can see, like, I can imagine someone who is a trained killer would think to do these kinds of things and would think to take these kinds of gambles on a situation. The way that she, tricks her way through it makes sense. So, but even from that point, I was willing to at least give it a shake. But then once you get through all this stuff where Nana actually starts to become a proper hero is where things get really good. And I think that when you have the time skip, I was incredibly invested in it by that point. I am going to keep up with this series, but I think it's going to be a thing just because the pace that this series maintains chapter to chapter, I don't think I could stand to be able to keep up with it chapter by chapter. I think it's going to be something where I'm going to like leave it for little stretches of time and check in on it again when there's a little bit of a backlog to go through. And that might be something that's going to happen for a little while because this series has been going for 8 years and we're as much into the story as we are now. Feels like it's going to be at least several more years before it's done.
Yes.
So
this doesn't. I mean, I didn't get to the time skip stuff, but I didn't get the vibe. This is like an ongoing that's ending sometime soon.
The way that the more recent chapters have left off does not feel that way.
And so, bummer, I guess it already had an anime like 4 years ago.
And apparently didn't do great. It got one season, so.
Which honestly kind of makes sense. Like it did
feel
like
that's the bad part.
You had to kind of get further in to get it. Yeah, that's a bummer though. And I do feel bad. I see Ninja in the chat post it gets better 20 hours in, which is famously what Final
It
Fantasy
gets better.
13
It gets
fans.
better 3 volumes in. I'll have you know.
But that is a little bit of the level where I was just like, because there are times I'm like, am I not giving this enough of a shake? And then I'd be like, holy fuck, that was a whole volume I read. I hate my life.
Yeah,
Like I would have paid $8 for that if I was buying these volumes.
it's
Fuck,
true.
time's tough. So yeah, I will give this. If you trust my opinion and Nick's opinion, and you should trust his more than mine, because once again, that's the smart one. I make the poop jokes. I am making the poop jokes.
Remember, guys, from the person who says that Dungeon Meshi sucks, Talentless Nana doesn't.
Yeah, exactly. That's the thing. I fully give her my recommendation. If you're on the fence, check this one out. I think you will like it. This is an ongoing. Maybe I'll find some way to discuss it. Also, I approached this topic. This is kind of a weird loosey-goosey episode, so enjoy, everybody. But I had it brought up to us. A bunch of people want us to read Zatch Bell 2 as a series we add to the recap. I don't know if you heard about this yet. Zatch Bell is a sequel.
Nope.
I have been hesitant to do it because there is no officially legal way to read the series. There probably never will be because the creator of Zatch Bell did not have great luck in their previous localization attempts, and I don't think there's some issue with public. Like, it's just probably never going to happen. So I am considering the idea of a bonus series where I'll read Zatch Bell 2. And maybe I'll get Nick to guest on it or something. I don't know. Or I'll just record it by myself. But I'm considering doing something about that because I obviously I hear people saying Zatch Bell 2 really, really good right now. Connecting point, I think if you are reading Zatch Bell and all these other monthly series and whatnot, I hope you add Talentless Nana to your rotation because I think you will enjoy it. For those people who read a lot more ongoing series than I do.
All right. I think that's good. I know that there was talk that we might talk about something else, but honestly, I'm kind of content with just like
we did it. Hey, Nick, I'm looking at that time. I told you and I told Ninja before this, an hour. I feel good as long as the content I put out is an hour. So, I feel good. I think we got a very substantial conversation. We'll save Chainsaw Man for next week, and I think maybe Kaiju had a chapter. I'm not sure, but yeah, we'll be back next week with a full episode, a whole bunch of stuff, and very very soon a real sadistic September pick. I've already picked it, and Nick agrees that it's going to be bad. So,
yep. So, guys, we're going to sign off here. There is something before we do the Sadistic September that we're going to read a little bit of, though. I
didn't know.
What?
I didn't know this was gonna. I'm playing along, Nick. I'm a really good actress.
Oh, well, you fooled me, so yeah I guess so.
Thank you.
So, first off, thank you everyone for listening, watching the show, etc. We do this here on twitch.tv/RoloC. Wednesdays is the usual recording time, sometime between 7:30 and 8. We had a lot of difficulties recording yesterday, so we did it Thursday this week. We also usually talk about a bunch of other manga. If you want to keep up on the conversation when the weekly chapters come out, you can join our Discord. There will be a link to the Discord community wherever this gets posted to. You can also check out our past episodes on weeklymangarecap.podbean.com, youtube.com/weeklymangarecap, and all sorts of podcast feed type places like Spotify and iTunes and that good stuff. The YouTube version, of course, is video version, so you'll be able to see our wonderful faces. And there is also an opening sequence done by Malajek Stills and Winston Chitter that you can check out at the beginning of each of those episodes. Steve Man also occasionally does thumbnail artwork for us. You can check out his work by searching for Steve Man Art all across the internet. We also want to thank Ninja X3i for maintaining the Google Doc, as mentioned before, that has all sorts of stuff associated with it, recommendations for future series if you want to add something that you want us to talk about in the future, and also voting for favorite series and MVPs every single week whenever there is a poll that goes out, which is every week, of course. And that's about everything. Patreon.com/weeklymangarecap.
We're going to have
a couple bucks to us.
Yeah, we're going to have a new episode, I hope, out very, very soon, actually. So stay tuned for that. Our Discord will announce when a new episode is out, but I am itching to talk about X-Men and Nick. Those are my two favorite things right now: X-Men and Nick.
Aw.
But I am genuinely very excited because I'm attempting something. I am currently just reading through X-Men as a whole. Like I just started at Uncanny X-Men #1 from like 1963, and I'm just gonna read forward basically. And I am very excited to tell Nick all about the 60s X-Men comics because they are a very stark difference from the Claremont era that immediately followed it.
But in the meantime, in Manga Talkie Land, in a couple of weeks, just before we do Statistics September and launch into our great plans for that, Quinn, let me ask you something. What is a sport that you know of that is heavily associated with Tokyo and the third part of giant movie franchises starring Vin Diesel?
Tokyo drifting? Are we gonna read about
That's right.
Drifting? Are we gonna read about a drifting manga?
Drifting is a sport is the tagline of Dricom by Yu Chiba, and that's what we're going to be reading. It's available on Manga Plus if you guys want to check it out.
Hell yeah, that sounds awesome. Do you think the lead is going to be like Vin Diesel's character in the Fast and Furious movies?
It appears that the protagonist is a young Japanese woman, so probably not.
Oh, that sounds so much better! Holy shit, I'm actually like really interested in this now. Fuck yeah, this sounds cool.
But every time she comes on, she says family and blows something up, and then it's like, all right, maybe this is a drifting series.
Or she could be like the weird kind of sexist Vin Diesel from the first movies, where like he hadn't kind of gotten cuddly yet, and he's just kind of a bully.
I'll take your word for it, because I think that I have watched 0.27 total Fast and Furious movies.
So, Nick, let me tell you my experience with the Fast and the Furious franchise.
New Patreon exclusive!
No,
it's Fast and Furious as explained by Manga. All 12 films!
It's very quick. I've seen number 10, and then I went back and watched number 1. And that's all the experience I have with the franchise.
That's like the recommended order some people have for watching Star Wars, where you watch him as Darth Vader and then go back to see him grow and then do the final part.
Oh, I thought they were like real maniacs who were like, you should start with The Force Awakens. Like you kind of want to know what they're going to be eventually evolving to before you go back and start laying the groundwork.
So yeah, drifting. We're gonna find out what Drycam's all about next time, everybody. Well, not next time. 2 weeks from now. Have a good one, all.
Goodbye, everybody.